Welcome to First in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I'm your host, Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, The Hand of Adonai series, Who is Harrison Sawyer, and Firsts in Fiction.
And I'm Alton Gansky, an author, smart aleck, and a few other things. One of the authors for the Harbinger series. My most recent book with him is, or novella with him is At Sea, and a whole bunch of other books.
And I am Molly Jo Rayleigh, and this is my last night as producer of this podcast because I really can't stand Al anymore. No, I'm kidding. I am also a smart aleck. I am author of the Unemployment Cookbooks, Volumes 1 and 2, and currently working on my location mystery novel, NOLA.
Excellent. And we do want to remind those of you listening to us on the audio-only podcast, you can watch us live at 6:30 in the p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can do that here on Google Hangouts. Best way to find us is aarongansky.com. You can find the live link there and follow that. And if you're there, you can chat with us in the chat room, which is always quite fun. In addition, if you are chatting with us live right now, we do ask that you share the links with this the podcast. There should be some buttons there at the top that you can click that will share this link out to your followers, and so we can expand our audience and all of that good stuff. I'm forgetting one other thing. Oh, yes, and if you're watching on YouTube, please click the thumbs up button. How could I forget? That's the easiest one, and I forgot it. So,
hey, Aaron, it looks like you have a different backdrop tonight.
It does, and I was going to say that in my intro. Recording live from Central California. If this looks familiar, it's because what my dad did is he took a picture of his library, and then he had it blown up to poster size and sent it to me. No, that's not what happened. I'm here visiting.
Motivating you is what it is. Those are all his books behind you.
True. So I am I'm here. Pops and I are in the same house in different rooms because that's how we do things now.
We just can't stand each other.
I was wondering why the desert was so much more, I don't know, calm today. Is it because Aaron and the boys aren't in the area?
When I was a teenager still living at home, I would work in my room, Pops, you would work in your room, and we would just chat with each other. It was pretty ridiculous. But
little messenger thing going on, and we're only 10 feet away from each other. Yeah, pretty bad.
Both our doors are open. We could have just spoken to each other, but
when my daughter was home, we would sit on the sofa next to each other and text each other. That's how we
okay, now that's bad. That's neurotic.
You need professional help, Molly. I don't understand what's wrong with you.
Wow. So apparently I'm not only quitting, but I'm being fired. So happy New Year. You were fired. Merry Christmas. No, just a restraining order, right?
Yeah. Hey, we need a new producer, Molly. Are you available?
Hey, I'm available.
You're hired. All right.
All right. Moving on.
Let's get to our Ask the Author question from Jacqueline Patterson.
Hey, Jacqueline.
And she asks, indie or traditional publishing, which route would you recommend for an unpublished writer? And I would say probably one of the two. That's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, either or.
Yeah, one of the two. This is a really tough question. And I think a lot of new writers are, I don't want to use the term tempted because it implies something negative, but they want to go with smaller indie publishers because the turnaround's a little bit faster. Perhaps they don't trust themselves to get a contract with a big publisher. They feel that the chances are so slim, they may not even try, etc. But I always feel that you should give traditional publishing a chance. Give them an opportunity, especially if you need an advance, if you need some money. That's probably going to be your best route. Now, you have to be patient. You just have to understand the entire industry is slow. Pops, you talked about this a little bit last week. We'll probably talk about it again this week. But the industry is just not fast.
I'm going to just interrupt you because isn't that slightly oxymoronic that you said if you need money and you need the advance to go traditional and yet it's extremely slow?
Well, just understand that most smaller publishers do not work on an advanced type of a system. They usually do royalty onlys. Depending on the size of the house. And Pops, I know when you get to your answer, you're going to better define those for us, those terms for us. But when I look at traditional versus indie, my first thought is big house paying in advance versus small house not paying in advance. And so my thought process is you should give the big guys a chance, give them an opportunity, set a timetable. Just understand it's probably going to take a calendar year for you to even possibly hear back. And maybe it'll be a little bit faster. You'll collect some rejection slips. That's all fine. Keep those someplace special, and just understand you're a real writer now because you've been rejected, and then keep waiting. If for whatever reason your book isn't catching on at the major houses and you've waited, a few months, a year, whatever the case may be, it's not bad to look at some indie publishers, and I would see what they can offer you. There are some really good indie publishers out there. So fair warning or full disclosure, that's the term I'm looking for. All of my books have been through LPC, Lighthouse Publishing of the Carolinas, and their imprint Brimstone, which I feel would be classified here as an indie publisher. I'll use the quotes here, meaning they don't pay advances. They call themselves a traditional publisher because they still pay royalties, percentage of royalties, and the percentage of royalties that they pay is vastly better than you'll get from a big time traditional publisher. And so it's really kind of a trade-off. One of the advantages of smaller houses is that they tend to work a little bit quicker. And so it's not uncommon for me to shop my work around, or rather have my agent shop my work around at some of the bigger publishers, including Tor at one point, before sending it out to some of the smaller indie publishers. As a matter of fact, before Hand of Adonai, before I got an offer for Hand of Adonai with Lighthouse, Tor was looking at it. And because of that, I was able to contact Tor through my agent. My agent contacted Tor and said, "I want to let you know we've got a contract offer on this book. Have you had a chance to look at it?" And Tor's response was very kind. He said, "Yes, we like it, but don't wait on us." Essentially, it was their polite way of rejecting me, saying, it looks good, but yeah, it's not going to be something that we're going to be working with. So,
And just so everyone knows, Tor is one of the biggest and most successful sci-fi fantasy publishers.
They're huge.
Yeah, it's spelled Tor. Tor.
Is that what it is, or are those initials like LPC is Lighthouse Publishing? Is Tor, or does it stand for something?
I'm trying to remember. The original editor was a science fiction writer, and he got talked into leading this publishing arm of a major publisher. Another publisher was starting it. But I don't remember now if Tor was part of his name or how that came about. So you'd have to hit Wikipedia for that and see. But I do know that they specialized for a long time in science fiction and fantasy, and that gives us one other thing in common, Aaron. They passed on me, so
high fives.
Yeah, there you go.
Rejection bros, awesome rejection bros. So been rejected by the premier publisher of fantasy and science fiction. So. But that was a nice rejection notice that I got from them. I count that as a positive. Any personal rejection that you get is a positive. A lot of writers think, "Oh, they rejected me, they must hate me." No, that's not the case. If they sent you a personal rejection, that means you were really close. The bad ones are the forum ones. It's like, "Oh, we didn't really read your book." So those are the ones that aren't encouraging. But anything that's personal, that says, "Hey, thanks for submitting. We like this part. We like that part. We don't have room for it in our publishing slate right now. Very sorry. Wish you the best of luck." Thumbs up on that. That's quite an accomplishment. But anyhow, my point here is that this is my very fancy way of not taking a side. My very political answer of it. It really depends on what's going to be right for you. I do think you should let the traditional publishers get a shot at your work. And then if that's not working out for you, look at some of the indies. But if there's an indie house that you really like, that you really believe in, there's submit to them. There's no reason why you can't submit to both. How about you, Pops?
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I was uncertain in the question is if Jacqueline was asking about indie publisher versus traditional publisher, or whether it's better to be an indie publisher yourself or go traditional. So I'm going to try to answer both sides of that. I think every serious writer wants to be picked up by a traditional publisher. There is something very gratifying in a professional firm saying, "Yes, we like this and we want to put some money behind it and do the best we can to get this thing out there and see how it sells." And there is a great deal of gratification in that. So very thankful for all the times I've traditionally published, but I've also published independently, but I've had reasons for those kinds of things. So a traditional publisher, also known as a legacy publisher, these are established houses. They offer a full range of services, including advance, like Aaron said. An advance is an advance against royalties. So they're going to pay you some money up front, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $1 million. I mean, they've gone that high before.
Nice.
You really just don't know what it's going to be. Stephen King got $5,000 for his first advance. I got $6,000. I try to hold that over his head, but it really doesn't work because his went into paperback and he got $200,000 or something like that for that. I can't remember now. So, and it'll vary from publisher to publisher. So they will offer an advance against royalties, and all that means is once your book starts earning royalties, you won't see any of it until that advance is earned back. They're paying you ahead of the sales. Indie publishing can refer to two things: a small publishing company like Aaron's talking about. Lighthouse Publishing of the Carolinas is a good one. My good friend Eddie out there started that. Came through our Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference, and as a writer, and went into the publishing side of things. He also writes. So it can be a small firm that doesn't offer an advance. They're not traditional in that sense, but you do get a contract. They work out the editing and the book covers and stuff like that. The other thing indie can refer to is the writer becoming the publisher. And don't confuse this with vanity press. This isn't you paying someone to publish your book. This is you becoming the publisher and publishing through Create Space for the physical books, Amazon for ebooks, Barnes & Noble, Smashwords, those kinds of things. And you oversee all of those things. There's some real advantages in doing that way. But nonetheless, and let me say this, many established writers who do publish through traditional publishing also publish independently. That is, they publish some of their own stuff because it just doesn't fit any of the current markets, and that way they get to write whatever they want. So the short answer is this: try the traditional route first. If you don't, you will always wonder what might have been. If you try and you can't get through, you can still self-publish or maybe go with a smaller publisher. And no shame in that. They sometimes do very, very well. And then sometimes bigger publishers come by and buy them. As way of example, you heard me mention the Harbingers Early, that series of novellas that four authors are doing. And we self-published those because they're novellas, and just not many publishers are going to do this kind of novella. They're not going to do it in serial format like a television show. There's just no one that does that, so we self-published them. And then along comes a major publisher and buys it. So you don't know. That sometimes happens. I think Jonathan Livingston Seagull was self-published and then picked up. Even Stephen King did was it The Silver Bullet? It was one of his books, or The Green Mile. I can't remember which one, but he self-published it for a while. Then, of course, it got picked up because, well, he's Stephen King.
Yeah. So Stephen King on the cover. It's probably going to sell a few copies.
Yeah.
I thought about legally changing my name to Stephen King, but I just didn't know if I could get away with it.
Well, as long as you don't pretend to be him, you probably could. But
yeah.
So I would say give it a try. I think you owe it to yourself.
To change your name to Stephen King?
Yes.
Awesome.
Now back to the question, though. I think you owe it to yourself to try to go through the traditional publishing, unless there's some reason not to. That is, you're out doing a lot of speaking. You have ways of selling books. You will make more money selling your own books than having someone else sell them. But I think you owe yourself the experience anyway of trying, and then if it goes that way, good things can happen.
How about you, Molly?
Well, I'm only in the midst of finishing my first novel, but I can say I self-published the Unemployment Cookbook and I formed my own company, New Inklings Press, in order to do so. I had been talking about the idea with family and friends for a while, and I knew I had readership and customers in the queue, basically. I also knew shopping it around was going to take a while, like you talked about for traditional or legacy publishing. My brother, bless his heart, being a marketing exec that he is, he does print ads for major corporations or major companies. And so I said, how about doing a cookbook layout, which is something different than a catalog, but he ran with it, came up with a great design, followed my general ideas, and then he just went to town with it. And then he shopped it out and found a printer, not a publisher, but basically an in-house printer that was capable of doing it the way we wanted. We had ink bleeding off the edge of the pages, which most printers didn't want to do because they said it was sloppy. Well, this one printer could. Because it was a small print shop, the fees were lower, and I couldn't basically stomach the idea of giving a publishing company funds, letting them take some of the income for all of our hard work. So we self-published. And I also have several small publications available on Amazon Kindle, which I couldn't do on my own if I had a traditional publisher, although listening to Al, yes, I could. But I like my most recent one I put together in half an hour, uploaded it to Amazon Kindle, and then 12 hours later it was available. So I like that. Having said all that, when NOLA is ready, I do plan to shop it around or find an agent to do so, because traditional and legacy publishing can open doors to a much bigger market. So when I'm ready, you guys can start whispering to your agents and say, hey, this girl's the next female Stephen King, and you really wanna contract her.
Something went wrong, Aaron. She dropped off there towards the end.
Yeah, it was weird. It was strange.
Person fiction listeners.
Stephanie King.
Can we just admit that I'm the producer, and if y'all want to do your own social media, I think you want to be a little nice to me right now.
All right. Okay, Stephanie King.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Stephanie Queen. How about that?
No, that just doesn't work for me.
No. I don't think I would change my name to Queen either. Okay.
Well, thank goodness for small favors.
Hey, Stephen Queen.
Was
a great
Steve
McQueen.
Steve McQueen, yeah.
Hey, from Hawaii Five-0. Okay, now I could do that. I could do Stephanie McQueen.
Okay. And,
moving on.
We are completely off topic now. So
your fault.
You're the producer. You're supposed to be keeping us on track, Molly.
I quit 15 minutes ago. I'm just a guest on this shindig.
I don't know why we are blaming Molly for everything tonight. So let's move on. Here's a wild card topic. Everything I wish I knew before I started. This is probably something that Molly is thinking right now about starting this podcast. But
I'm wishing I knew who these people were before I signed up for the job.
Yeah, really. But as in any job, once you've been doing it for a number of years, you kind of start to realize and look back and reflect and think, I didn't realize it was going to be like this at the outset of my journey. Now, I think it's fair to say that now that Pops and I have had, combined, we've been writing for 50 years, 60 years, something like that, between the two of us. So
wow.
You're making me sound old.
Most of it's you, but I'm going to go ahead and try and take credit here slowly. But with this number of years of publishing behind us, we learned a lot in that process, and I think it's safe to say that neither one of us would change the way our journey played out. We might have slightly altered our courses here and there, but it's nice to know a little bit about what you're getting yourself into. And so here is a quick list of things we wish we'd known before we started in this business. Now, Pops, you did most of this work here, putting these together, the show notes, and I kind of looked at them and nodded my head and said, yep, that's about right. So I'm going to kind of hand this off to you and let you talk a little bit about it. You've broken this down into different areas, the first of which is the work. So what is it about the work that you wish you had known before you started?
Well, one of the first things I learned is that there's a difference between the dream of writing and the real world of writing.
Now you tell me. Thanks.
Yeah. In the real world, it's a little different. We sometimes get this vision. We're going to be sitting around typing on our keyboard, and there'll be a Irish setter sitting next to us, and we'll have our favorite beverage nearby, and we'll be dearly loved, and people will be calling for interviews. Most of the time, it's not that way. In the real world, writers spend a lot of time in solitary confinement. They're not forced into it. It's a chosen solitary confinement. And the truth is, most writers enjoy this because we are very often more comfortable in our own heads than we are in the real world. But their office space, my office space, any novelist's office space, is their spaceship, their time machine, their factory, their era, the Roaring '20s, whatever you want. That's what your office becomes. And so novelists often spend far more time with their characters and in imaginary places, or reconstructed places out of history, than with real people. And so you have to be comfortable with the idea of being alone a lot. And
I would add, it's one of the reasons that is because it's really difficult, if not impossible, to write with more than one person in the room. Pops, I'm not sure if you feel this way, but I often will let, as a teacher, I'll let some students come in at lunchtime. I'm not writing then. I might be doing some other work, but it's not writing, because it's really hard. Even if I'm typing, trying to write, and I've got kids in the room, if I'm just in the living room with them, it can be quite the distraction, and it's hard to be in two places at once. So like you say, Pops, it is very much a self-imposed solitary confinement, and just understand that that's going to be the reality for stretches of hours at a time. If you're on deadline, sometimes it's days or weeks at a time. And so just be prepared that there will be long periods of days, weeks, months, years where you are unavailable to the rest of the world.
After Jerry Jenkins had a great deal of success in a newer home, he had a place, I think he calls it the Cave, where he does his writing. And it has no internet. It does have a phone, but only one person can ring it, his wife. So no outside phone calls can come in. And that's what he does, is he sequesters himself when he gets to the real writing portion. And then he has, I think, another office where he deals with all the business and stuff like that. But when it's time to get down to putting words on a page, he does the equivalent of going into a cave and not letting anyone else in. So I know sometimes when I'm on deadline, even if I'm alone in the house, I will shut the door to my office. It's just a psychological thing of I'm blocking out the rest of the world so I can focus, because transporting yourself into your characters and into strange or unusual places or historical places is a lot of hard work. And so the brain doesn't need any more distraction from that.
And we've already mentioned this at the outset of the show and last week as well, but the fact that publishing is a very slow process, it's a slow business. Now, Pops, I had the advantage of knowing you. I knew a guy when I was embarking on my writing career. So a lot of this I knew going into it, but I was still shocked at the rate that publishing took. And you had prepared me. It's going to take a while. It's going to take months, and don't expect to hear back anytime soon. And I waited, and I thought I was being patient, but I didn't feel very patient toward the end. And so it is very much a long-term game. It's the long play. It's not you're not turning around a book inside of a week. Just, if that's kind of your idea, it's not going to happen. I think we had to ask the author question about that, like, how can I write a book and start making money fast? And it's like, well, you can't. Be
a journalist.
Yeah, I mean, write something other than a book. Novels very much take time.
Right. Yeah, it is slow. A lot of people don't realize how long it takes from the time you get a contract to the time the book hits. I know in the general market, it's over a year now. When I first started, it was about a year in the general market, and I was writing for the Christian market, and it was less than that. But it was about 6 months or so. And I don't know if you ever watched an author being interviewed about his new book or her new book, and they seem a little lost. It's because in some cases, it's been 2 years since they've written it. And they're having to go over it again and try to remember some of the things. And it used to get to me. They would ask me specific questions. Now, what were you feeling at the moment you wrote this? I have no idea. That was a long time ago. I've written 3 other books since then. So publishing is very slow. It's like watching turtles race, or you can say it moves at glacial speeds. So I would say this. Let me give you an Al's axiom. Number 26, or some number. Choose your own number. Publishing is a process. It is not an event. It's not throwing a light switch. It's not winning an award. It is a process, and that is the writing and the proposal and the pitching, and then the acceptance and the contract, and then the editing that goes into it, and then all the other stuff that goes on. It's a process. And you just have to prepare yourself for that it is a process.
Agreed. The turnaround time, I think, with LPCs and Brimstone, their goal is a year from contract. And they're usually pretty good about that. I've got another publisher that I'm working with now, another small indie publisher, and I think they're hoping the turnarounds are going to be faster than a year, which is pretty remarkable if they're able to pull it off. But even then, we're looking at February, and I think we signed the contract this summer. And so that's, 9 months or something like that. And that's still going to be a really fast turnaround. I kind of doubt that we'll be able to get it done in that time, because it is a process. It's not an event. I like the way you say that. There are several things that need to be done, and you're going to be intimately involved in the process. I don't know if we have that note in here or not, but the amount of work that you're going to do on your book after you sign the contract is astronomical. You'll work more on your book after you're finished writing it than you did writing the thing. You tend to read your book 6, 7, 8, 9 times or more when you're going back and forth with your editor. It gets to be not only time consuming, but at some point, Pops, I don't know, you ever get your book back and think, I got to read this thing again? Can I just be done with this book?
Yeah. So. Yeah, I have. I've been there, and I keep thinking, please don't make me read this again. Because really you get to the point where you can't recognize anything anymore. So you just start looking for the specifics that they send to you. Can you do this? Well, what about this? And
yeah. No. And I know you remember when the bargain came out on audio, and I don't know if I've mentioned it on the show, but you can actually get the bargain on audible.com, and I would highly recommend it. Not just because I wrote it, but the dude who read it did a fantastic job.
Very good.
Just an unbelievably good job. Quick story on that. When selecting the narrator for this particular project, I sent in my top 3 candidates, and he was my number 1. And I sent it to my publisher, and he goes, "Oh, really? You wanted him? He's your first pick?" He was like my 3rd pick. And I said, "Oh, that's funny. You were wrong the first 2 times. This is the guy." Let's just. And so luckily, Eddie's a great guy, and he ran with it. But yeah, pick it up. Even if you have the book already, get it on audio. It's a different experience. But I remember listening back through it going, did I write that? I don't remember writing that, because it had been years and years and years since I'd been in that book. But I've probably read it, 50 times before then. So it is a slow process. It's very, very much a slow process. And then there's always the challenge of hitting the moving target, which is really difficult with the traditional publishers who tend to try and get in on the new waves. The vampire craze when Twilight came out, and then there was Hunger Games and what's the other one?
The Divergent. Yeah, they used to call them bonnet books.
Bonnet books, yeah. All these waves of popularity, and then the publishers want to jump in on them and ride the wave of popularity. But if you start writing, if you read Twilight and you were incredibly inspired by it, and you wrote the next Twilight, by the time you get it published, vampires are probably not popular anymore. As a matter of fact, look at it now. The vampire craze lasted for a year, maybe 2, and then it kind of died away. Mm-hmm. So it's tough. It's tough if you're trying to write something because it's popular. You're probably doing it backward, right? Pops, what would you say? And what should writers do instead of trying to write what's popular at the time?
Well, yeah, it is impossible to predict. If it were possible to predict, then every publisher would be publishing a bestseller. They don't know either. And so, and you've heard me say this before, the old joke is when somebody looks at a building where a publisher operates from, publishing building, they think you're looking at a business, but you're really looking at a casino. It's all a gamble. At some point, you're just tossing the dice. So write what you love. If you're going to put that many hours in, write what you love. You might be surprised that it takes off, or it may take off later. And even if it just gets you in the door, but isn't a great seller, then the next book might be better. So write what you love. Don't be derivative. Don't I had an agent, one of my former agents, one time. We were talking about how to get things moving, and she said, "You know what you need to do? You need to write the next Dan Brown novel."
But
And I
you're
said, "Well, what
not
does that look like?"
Dan Brown.
I said, "What does that look like?" And well, she couldn't tell me. So yeah, it makes sense. It's the same way of saying is, you know what you need to do? You need to write a bestseller. All right, well, how do I do that? I don't know. Okay, so you got to be careful about those things. Write what you love, step up to the plate, take your at bat. And if it doesn't work out, then that's true for so many businesses too. It's just part of the game we play.
That's really good advice, though, to write a bestseller. I don't know why I hadn't considered that before. Here I am writing all these books that I just, just from mediocre sales.
I want you to know, Al, I heard you, I've been hearing you, and I am currently writing the next bestseller. So I listened, okay?
Okay, very good.
I want you to know I listened. I know about your son, but...
Once you write that best-selling novel, why don't you tell us all how you did it?
I might tell your dad, but,
Tell the publishers how you accomplished it. So, the other point is that competition is super heavy. And I remember being up at the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference, and somebody was giving their talk about it. They had a keynote speaker giving a speech about basically how slim your chances were of getting published and getting a contract. You have a better chance of winning the lottery, I think they had said at one point, and on and on and on about basically give up your dream of ever being a writer. And we were all sitting in the crowd like, is this supposed to be pumping us up? Because I don't think we're getting the message the right way. So, and he, at the end, I think he twisted it to try and be an encouragement and say, well, you don't write because of the money, you write because it's what you love. But I think a lot of us left just completely shell-shocked.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, Ray Bradbury said that don't write for the money.
Right.
Even though he did all right. And he was writing mostly short stuff. But it was a different time. But he would say, don't write for the money.
I like the part about that quote about you have a better chance of winning the lottery because, well, I'd like to play the lottery now and then too. So
well, you can either win the lottery
or be a bestseller.
You can publish a book. So it's your choice. Everybody gets that option, by the way. I don't know.
Well, if I win the lottery, I can buy enough of my own books to make it a bestseller, right?
You are thinking. Mm-hmm. So
it's extremely frowned upon.
Well, it's not like I would admit to it. I'm not going to tell anybody I'm doing it. So
two guys wrote a business book that hit the New York Times bestseller list, and they found out what they were doing is going from bookstore to bookstore, buying all the books.
And losing money. I feel like they would lose money on that proposition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they were after something else. They weren't after royalties. They were after making a name for themselves.
Right.
That's funny and sad.
I think they were consultants or something like that. Yeah.
If only I had the money. Well, the fact that remains that competition is super heavy. You've walked into a Barnes and Noble. There's a lot of books there, and not always a lot of people. And so they've got a wide variety of options. And publishers, again, it's a slow business. They only have so much money. There's only so much that they can do. They can only award so many contracts. And so they can't give a contract to everybody who submits a proposal. And so the competition is very, very tough out there. And this is why we're talking about proposals, trying to find ways to get your proposal to stand out from the rest, to kind of increase your chances so that you have a more competitive edge, that you're increasing your probability of getting noticed, and trying to find that contract there.
Yeah, it's important to remember that some of the most famous writers that we know have endured great rejection time and time again. Tom Clancy's book, his first book, he was an insurance broker. He'd been writing this book, and he finally places it. Trying to remember the name of the book now. I can't think of it. Maybe somebody in the room will help me out here. I've got the wrong name. I keep saying Red Storm Rising. That's not it. It's the submarine book. Red October. That's what I'm looking for. Thanks. Yeah, his book, Red October. went to really a small publishing academic publisher, Annapolis Press, and they don't normally do fiction, but they did fiction. And he was doing really just a lot of things wrong, but he had written a great book. He hit it big because Ronald Reagan was carrying the book when he got off Air Force One, and a reporter asked him what he was reading. And he said, I don't know who briefed this guy, but we need to check into that. It's a great book. That's how Tom Clancy became famous. Okay, nice. You can't buy that stuff. You can't plan that stuff. Stephen King went through all kinds of rejection. He threw his first book, Carry Away. His wife made him pick it up and continue on. So he's been through that. John Grisham failed time and time and time again with his book, A Time to Kill, and finally placed it with a tiny little publisher. Then he wrote his next book, and then off it went, the firm. And then all of his stuff was great. J.K. Rowling was living on what we would call food stamps. They would say, I think in England, on the dole. I'm not sure that's the right term, but anyway, she was, getting government help just to survive for her child and herself. And it was rejected time and time again, and an American company picked it up and became very famous, and now she's the wealthiest woman in Europe. So the competition's heavy. There's rejection that comes with it, but that rejection can give way to something great at any time. And you probably won't be in control of that.
So though the competition is stiff, I think we do want to end with that encouraging note that it's not impossible. Competition makes for good writers. That's what competition does. It makes people better at what they do. If there were no competition, nobody would ever seek to improve themselves. And so look at them not as threats, but as an opportunity for you to practice a little bit more and develop your game. So it's like any other.
You mentioned Barnes and Noble and all the books, and I've done that where I've gone in and I thought, man, I can't compete with all of this. And then something hit me, and it's been my go-to ever since. When I walk into a bookstore with a bunch of books, first thing I think of is all these guys have done it. I can do it too. Yeah. It's just proof that it gets done all the time, and there's always new writers being published. Always. That has never stopped. How successful you are, again, probably not in your hands. But so when I see all those books, I think all these people did it. So what's keeping me from doing it?
I would agree with that. I think now the way the publishing is headed with the advent of small indie presses, they're much more numerous. It's a lot more cost effective to publish now. There are more publishing houses, and therefore there are more contracts. So I think we're actually at a point now where it's, I don't want to say easy to get a contract, but it might be easier now than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago, before we had all these self-publishing types of options, before we had the rise of the smaller indie publishers. You have more opportunities now. There are more niche. How do you pronounce that word? N-I-C-H-E, niche?
Niche.
Yeah. Niche. Nikki?
Like crochet.
Yeah. Anyhow, there are more specifically targeted publishers available to you now that you can submit to than I think there ever were before. And so that should be encouraging. However, you will have to work with editors. And many of these editors are not writers. Different skill set, and that can be a challenge. So this is another thing. I always thought it'd be great to work with an editor, and then, you work with different types of editors. And I've been lucky enough working with Bethany. She's incredible, and I realize that not everybody gets a Bethany, sadly. When I had another editor before Bethany, and we didn't always agree on things. And so I actually had to take it to the publisher and say, we've got this particular issue that we disagree on. You're the publisher, you have the final say. What's your decision? And so what I did with that is I stuck with my guns. I was open to change if it was going to benefit the book. And if it wasn't, then I simply stuck to my guns and I said, this is why I need to keep it the way it is. But Pops, you've had to work with several different editors. How do you handle this type of a situation?
Well, first thing to remember is that editors are not necessarily writers. Some are. Some writers become editors. Some never wanted to be writers. Maxwell Perkins never wanted to write. People tried to get him to write a book, and he goes, "I'm not a writer. I'm an editor." And editors can make or break you. If it wasn't for someone like Maxwell Perkins, then Fitzgerald would not have gotten his start. Neither would Tom Wolfe. Neither would Hemingway. Hemingway hit his stride because Max Perkins was his editor. He went out on a limb for these guys. So they can make a great difference. But every once in a while, you get one who doesn't really know. I've only had two that I've really had to take to task. And, over almost 50 works, that's been pretty good to only have two do that. So sometimes you have to stand up for your principles and what you think is right. However, anytime an editor marks something of mine that needs attention or says this isn't right, I listen first, because there's been 2 or 3 times when I've been wrong in my life. And then, I never know, there could be a fourth one. So I take my time, I listen to it, I make sure that I'm not responding emotionally. And then I ask, does it really matter? Sometimes when you get edited, for example, some writers get all hung up about, well, they're adding commas. What's a different style? There's heavy comma usage, there's light comma usage. And I've had editors on both sides. I really don't care. Okay, it's a house style, and unless it creates a problem, I don't care. And I've never had a reader write to me and say, really your editor took the light comma usage path instead of the heavy comma usage path. They don't care. Right? As long as it communicates, that's all that matters. So in most cases, your editor is your friend and your partner, and you treat them with great respect because they can save you a great deal of embarrassment. I've had editors catch a word or two that I misspelled, but that spell check doesn't catch. Mm-hmm. The movie sat on the hot, dusty earth eating rice from a rough wooden bowl. There's no E in bowl. And an editor caught that, and I am extremely grateful that we didn't put out 10,000 of those or so. So it happens from time to time. So editors are great, whether the copy editors, the macro editors, substantive editors, and you really rely on them. If you have a good one, you are blessed beyond all measure. But every once in a while you get one that's a bit of a problem, but that's true in every area of life. So nonetheless, as solitary as a writer's life is, it also includes a great deal of interaction with others. So writing is a solitary pursuit. Al's axiom number 27. Writing is a solitary pursuit. Publishing is a team sport. And so if you want to be published, you're going to be working on a team.
Yeah, I've heard Aaron say over and over, and as an editor, I would agree that you have to have communication with your editor, what you've both been saying. It's important to know that editing is subjective and based on the author's style. Aaron I know he hates strongly dislikes exclamation points. And I love ellipses. Aaron, we talked about how your other editor kept putting in exclamation points when you were taking them out. Mm-hmm. You have to communicate and tell your editor, and as an editor, I will read through the first few chapters and ask my authors, what's your writing style? What do you want me to accomplish here? Is it a substantive edit? Are you looking for punctuation? Do you like this? Do you not like that? I'm not going to arbitrarily change the formatting or the style or even their usage of punctuation unless it has to be changed. So I think definitely communication with your editor is a really big pro.
I was well into my career before I learned how to do this, but publishing houses have style sheets. I started creating my personal style sheet. Now I would do this when I was editing someone else's work. I'd create a style sheet. The writer does this. The writer is prone to single word sentences, which you can get away with in fiction. The writer capitalizes personal pronouns of deity or doesn't capitalize them. So on my books, I would make them. And I would say, this is what I do. I uppercase personal pronouns of deity. I like ellipses with spaces between them, the way Chicago Manual of Style says they ought to be. So, and I would make a list of the author preferences. And that's what I would title it, author preferences.
I like
Bethany made one of those for me, and I'd never heard of it. But she does them, I think, for all of her clients. I don't know that she's doing much editing anymore. She's been doing more of her writing, which is fantastic for the rest of the world, and sad for me because I just want her to edit everything that I ever write from now until the end of time. But I suppose I should let her have her time to write her own books, just because she's a good writer. So that's always out there. But I had never thought of that, Pops, and that's great to have a personal style sheet. And so she asked me some tough questions. She's like, "Hey, how do you want to handle this? Because you've done it differently in different places." And I'm like,
Right.
I don't know. Let's go with that first one. She's like, "Okay." And then she knows consistently what I like to do and what I don't like to do and what my common errors are and all that kind of stuff. So we work really well together as a team. So that's always good. Now, we do need to talk a little bit about the business part, because as a writer, you are solely responsible for your business. Now, Pops, you've been a full-time writer for years. I've never done it where my entire income comes from my writing. I've always had the day job to kind of back me up. So what types of things have you learned in your experience being your own boss, being running your own business?
Being a full-time writer is like taking a vow of poverty for most of us.
Hmm.
Yeah. One thing I learned, and I've taught this over and over to people, but it took me a while to learn it. I alone am responsible for my business. And by that, I mean, you must manage your own work, your own timing. You must manage your agent. That sounds odd because we think agents manage writers. They don't. They help place writers. They offer opinions. They help them formulate a plan for their career. Okay, but you must manage your agent, because sometimes agents don't get it right. Or they get caught up with things, or something slips through the cracks. So you have to be the one who's aware of that. It took me a while to learn that. You must at times manage your publisher. I've had to do that a few times, not a lot of times, but a few times. And really what I'm trying to say is you need to be aware of every aspect of it, so you're up to date on what's going on with your own project. These are all people dealing with scores of other writers, and as such, they can overlook things, they can make mistakes, just like we do. So that's really what the partnership is. The team effort is we help each other, we cover each other. And that way we get the closest to a perfect book as possible. First edition is never perfect, but you at least try to get close to it.
And you also have this note here, Pops: beware the naked man who offers you his shirt. Now, of course, I would like to go on record as saying that naked men are never to be trusted. But I don't know if you're able to maybe explain a little bit more what you mean by a naked man offering you a shirt.
I had to think about that when I saw that in the show notes, and I'm like, but if he's naked, he doesn't have a shirt? I don't understand.
That's it, exactly.
Oh, good.
The line comes from one of Harvey Mackay's nonfiction books back in 1996. It's incidentally the year my first book was written or published. But he wrote a book called Beware the Naked Man Who Offers You His Shirt. And the idea, of course, is if he's naked, he doesn't have a shirt to give you. So if he's making you an offer that you can have his shirt, you probably shouldn't trust him, because he doesn't have anything to give you. So I sometimes change it to beware the naked man who offers to sell you his shirt. That is, he has something to gain by selling you the shirt. The principle here is this: a person can't sell you what they don't have. They can't give you what they don't have, although many a con man has tried to do it. So my point is simply this: be careful where you get your advice. And this is really true in the writing world, more and more these days, especially since the arrival of the ubiquitous internet. So years ago, I noticed something. I would collect books on how to write, and I noticed as I was collecting these that I had never heard of the people who wrote the how to write books or the books that they wrote. And in most cases, in many cases, not most, but in many cases, I discovered they wrote one book and decided their second book would be to teach the world how to write and get published. And my thinking is they probably haven't been seasoned enough. They haven't had enough experience to do that. And more now, I'm seeing people offering advice on how to be a writer when they themselves have not become a writer. So this is, to me, is the naked man offering me his shirt.
Yep.
right? I can tell you how to be a writer and what to do and how to do your proposal. And then you find out that they have never successfully done that themselves. So you want to learn from those that have achieved what they're trying to teach you. If they haven't done that, then be very careful. And the internet is choked with unqualified teachers. I'm not going to pick on anyone in this. That's not my goal. My goal is, remember I said you have to manage your business, you have to manage your education. You got to pick the people who know what they're talking about. So there's some very good ones out there. My friend James Scott Bell writes how-to books. Well, he's written, I don't know how many, 40 novels or something like that. And he's a brilliant man. And what he teaches is spot on. And you could say with Dean Koontz, when he was young, he wrote a how-to book. It doesn't really apply today anymore because so much has changed. But nonetheless, he had been through the mill. He knows how to do it. So him I listen to. There have been some who've gone on to be agents. They quit writing, but they go on to be agents. But they did write, and as an agent, they see the workings of the publishing. And those people I listen to, they're making their money being agents. So you just have to be careful with it. And that's one of the things I wish I knew when I first started. That not everybody who has advice knows what they're talking about. You got to find the ones who do.
Absolutely.
This next section, the publishers, because we're running out of time, I suggest we just kind of skip over it.
Yeah, that's fine. We do have one last, or actually two last sections, and we are running out of time. So, but we could probably get through at least one more. You want to do, we got readers, bookstores, or emotions?
Boy, I don't know. Well, these are all going to be in the show notes, so people can pick these up over at your website.
Let's do emotions real quick because that's short, and then I don't know, the readers is a lot of really good advice as well. Let's do the readers.
So you get the show notes because we do talk about the publishers a little bit and what I wish I'd known about that. The readers, the power of readers, amateur and professional reviewers. And in bookstores, we talk about the change in bookstores. That one's really quick. Let me just say this. Bookstores are going the way of newspapers. There's still a few. Barnes & Noble is still hanging on there, but there used to be dozens of bookstores. So your choices now are pretty much Barnes & Noble and a mom and pop store. There just aren't many. It's one of the things that have changed, and that's because we order most of our books online now. Amazon changed all of that. And Barnes & Noble and other people too, but mostly Amazon was the leader in that. So the emotions. When I went in, I assumed there would be great joy being a writer, and there is. I do enjoy it. I remember sitting in the movie theater watching Back to the Future 1985, and McFly's father opens a box, and it's his author copies from his first novel, and he holds it up. And I was just moved with that. I remember thinking, man, I want to get a box like that. That really motivated me. And I did 10 years later, but I did finally get that done. There is great joy in that. And of course, there's criticisms and amateur reviews and stuff like that. But sometimes even professional reviews can be very, very wrong. I had a book reviewed. It was in a major magazine. It was talking about medical-based novels, and it listed my book through my by my hands, and it said. By My Hands is not a medical novel, and it shows. What? A pizza is not a donut, and it shows. It made no sense. Then they described characters in the book and the basic plot line and and it wasn't even my book. They put the wrong name on it.
Ouch.
It was someone else's book they were panning, and they put my title on it. So even the professionals get it wrong with that. So there's great joy, but there's a price to pay for that too. There is a price of creativity. Creativity can be an emotional roller coaster. You can be the up and the downs. And this is very common with creative people. Whether they're painters or sculptors, they tend to be very manic depressive. They're up, they're down, they're up, they're down. I'm lousy. I can never do any good work. I do that every time I send a book in. I'm overjoyed that I achieved this great accomplishment. And 15 minutes later, I'm saying, oh, they're going to hate this. This is going to prove I can't write. So what do you do with that? You just write it out. It's not unusual, and everybody has ups and downs. But creativity does come with some kind of cost. I didn't know that coming into the writing. Doubt and confidence take turns.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be surprised by that. I just don't listen to the doubt, and I encourage the confidence. Doesn't mean I don't have doubt. I do all the time. I quit every Monday. Living privately in a public place, any work you do, it's going to be people out there reading it. And that's the thing about art, and that should say thing, and I think about art is that the artist exposes himself or herself to the opinion of the public, and that can at times be discouraging, at times it can be uplifting. It's at times very painful because people are prone to offer opinions, many of them not qualified to have the opinions. Some are, some aren't. So I don't know how many times I've received free advice, and you know how much it was worth? The cost, free, yeah. It just wasn't worth it. Or I get contacted by people who want me to give them free advice because I'm a published author, so surely I have time to give free advice or endorse my book, not realizing, one, I'm a slow reader to begin with, and then what do I do if I don't want to endorse it? I have to tell you, sorry, I can't endorse your book. I've had to do that a couple times. No joy there. Will you read my book? Will you edit my book? When you become a published author, that sometimes happens. You just have to know that going in and set up some parameters. And as I said earlier, quit every Monday. If you feel like quitting, go right ahead. Knock yourself out. Quit. Turn the computer off. Leave. Go to Starbucks. Do something. The only thing to that is you can't stay quit. Mm-hmm. Feel free to quit, but you can't stay quit. I'll give you a day off. I give you a week off, but you get back to it sooner or later.
And I think what you'll find, I don't know if this is true for everyone, but you can't stay quit. When it's in you, and you're going to come back to it. And so, like you say, Pops, there's the joy. There's the alternating, elation of writing the greatest prose known to mankind, which is followed the next day by writing the, steamiest pile of garbage that anybody's ever written. And so you do alternate between those two kind of poles, but regardless, you come back to it because you have to. And if you can quit and stay quit, maybe you shouldn't be writing. I just think if I quit for more than anything more than a couple of hours or a day, I get ornery, and my wife has to send me to my room to write so that I get
depressed.
Yeah.
I'm not big about laying those kinds of things out in public, but I think interested writers, serious writers, need to know that. And I find that's true for most writers. If they stop for some reason, they get depressed.
Yeah.
It happens to me all the time, and that's probably why I keep putting my butt in the chair.
You know what else I would say, and this is, I don't know if this is just off the top of my head here, but I would say never quit when you're done with a project. And we're using the term quit here as take a day off, take a couple of days off, whatever. Give yourself some time away. I think personally I would avoid that because it would be easier for me to not come back. Whereas if I've got a project started, there's no way I'm going to leave it unfinished. That might just be my own personal kind of personality. That might just be my personality. But I think it's really important to maintain a project, an open project. You should always have a work in progress. That's kind of how I feel. Once you finish a book, start another one. Pops, do you find that to be true for yourself?
Yeah, I do practice this thing known as the walk away. And that's where if I'm getting frustrated, I'm not able to solve the problem, I'm feeling bogged down with something, I'll get up and leave. And I may call it a day. I may go to a movie. I may go do something else. That process takes the chains off the brain. And then often the answers will come to me or the direction will come to me, and then I come back and I can sit down. So every once in a while, you have to get back up. I mean, you have to get out, but then you have to go back and get to work. So if you have to do the walk away, I think that's very advantageous. If you're doing a lot of walking away and very little work, then there's a different problem going on.
Agreed. Well, Molly, did we have anybody in the chat room tonight?
We did. We had Tess DeGroot showed up at the beginning. She said she was unable to stay, but she at least checked in. And then she had to leave. She is doing NaNoWriMo write-in tonight. So she just wanted to say hi, and she'll watch it later. Becky Lindsay and Jacqueline Patterson checked in, and we were just talking about Thanksgiving and who's doing what. And I let Jacqueline know that we answered her Ask the Author question, and that, of course, my answer was the best, but she can decide for herself when she watches it. Becky says that all this stuff was great and helpful except for the Beware of Naked Men section. That was a little intimidating. It was right when she checked in, so way to go, Becky. Thanks for sticking it out.
Aren't you glad this isn't a video podcast?
Oh, thank goodness for some of those things. And they both said that they go through writing withdrawals. Jacqueline says she goes through writing withdrawals if away from her laptop for more than an hour. These holidays are difficult because she's obviously spending time with family. I agree with her. Love spending time with family and friends, but my laptop is going everywhere I go. And if they don't leave me alone for at least 15 minutes every hour, it's going to get really ugly in town.
Hey, Pops, you're going to have to give me some time away tomorrow. I got some work to finish up.
Well, you could bank it. You could bank it like spend 4 hours with the family and then go into hiding for an hour or something.
Okay. All right. So, well, excellent. So next week, we've got a wild card coming up. So we will discuss the topic, and you guys can all wait in eager anticipation while we discuss that. We'll let you know hopefully as early as tomorrow when I put up some show notes. Hopefully I'll be able to do that tomorrow. It is coming up on Thanksgiving. So we want to say happy Thanksgiving to all of you. I know a lot of you out there visiting family, traveling, so do be safe. My family just got into town this morning, visiting Pops and Mom and all of them. So good times, enjoy your time, get some writing done, and then tune in next week where we will be doing a wild card. So until then, don't forget, you can find us at altongansky.com, aarongansky.com, and frankly, mydearmojo.com. And we thank you all for listening. Until next week, good writing.